Welcome, everyone, to season two. This is the first episode of the season, which is actually episode 11 overall. I have a very, very special guest today. I never actually thought I would get him to be a guest in my podcast, but I'm really happy and excited that he is. This is none other than Robert Hayes, the former COO of TaskUs, who I met back in 2016. When I met him the first time, TaskUs was only at around 800 to 1,000 employees. When he left, they were at 20,000 employees, and he's now the CEO of Athena Go, or Athena, right? Which is a brand new type of virtual assistant agency. It's pretty cool. Very high level, very boutique, very um, high end. So today we talk about his journey from Canada all the way to the Philippines, his journey in the BPO industry, and his journey in TaskUs specifically. We'll also cover some of his best practices and tips on how to really make the most out of your life and really be able to live your dreams and live your best life, right? Robert is a very special person to me. I look up to him a lot. He's one of the people that I admire a lot and I see a lot of myself in. And so I'm trying to do a lot of things that he would do, right? Like I'm trying to learn a lot from this man. So without further ado, this is a very special episode, kickoff for season two, and I hope you enjoy it. Enjoy. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining again today. We have a very special guest, someone who I've always looked up to. I worked with him for a few years back in TaskUs, and that was a point in my life, in my career, where I learned the most, especially around culture and really taking care of people and really working with other A players. I was very raw when I joined TaskUs, but by the time I was done, I think I learned so much more. Like I exponentially learned a lot more. So I have here today Robert Hayes. Robert, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor. I'm a little bit nervous. I can't even. It's still surreal that you're here with me, man. Like the last time, I can't even remember the last time we talked, but I'm so honored and so appreciative that you're here. I know you're a busy guy. First question, I guess, would be like, could you tell us how you even um, got to the Philippines to begin your career in building stuff here, building BPO industry? You're such a landmark by the time you
Yeah,
left.
yeah, yeah. It's a funny story, but it's a story of desperation. I think more than anything, as it is for when you're younger, right? So I think all of us, we kind of go through those young parts of our life where we're trying to figure out who we are, what we stand for. We're trying to be successful, right? We're trying to go through challenges. My parents, they were moving. They were basically leaving the area that I went to high school in. And when they left, I had a decision at that point in my life. What do I do? Right? Only 17 years old. Do I leave all my friends? Do I go to this place with my parents that I don't know? Or do I, stay and tough it out? Right. So, I don't often go back to this place in my mind, but every once in a while it kind of pops up. I stayed and I couch surfed some of my friends' couches. It was a tough time because I didn't have much money. But long story short, I just was desperate enough to kind of do whatever job I could to kind of put myself through school and at the same time have enough money to eat and to live. So I was doing grocery store work. I was delivering pizzas. I was washing dishes.
Wow,
Um, Back then, yeah,
I can't
yeah,
imagine.
crazy time. Yeah, yeah. And I found a job which was it was a call center job, and it was working with an American telecommunications firm where we basically just sold phone equipment. Right, it was really early call center stuff. This is like in the early 2000s, and I just liked that job better than my other jobs because it was about merit, it was about performance. Right, there was, you know, in a dishwashing place, like if you wash the dishes faster, I mean,
You just get more
doesn't
dishes.
exactly
Yeah.
right. So I like the fact that there was performance management in it, and I just embraced it. Right. I worked hard. I worked on my sales skills. I worked on my leadership skills. And a lot of stories of hard lessons learned going through the early ranks of a call center employee. But I just worked really, really hard, poured my all into it, and tried to adapt and learn. And eventually, I kind of worked up through the ranks, and I got to a position where a leader of mine wanted me to take a site, which was in my hometown. And around this time, I was traveling US, I was traveling different places and helping, and I really didn't want to take the job. Um, and the reason I didn't want to take the job was because at that time, like, just so many relationships, so many people from my hometown. My hometown was small, so everybody knew everybody. And I just knew it was going to be very difficult to separate business and personal. It was going to be tough to be hard on people with close relationships, right? So I basically told him, hey, I'll do the job, but the next opportunity that becomes available, you need to give it to me, right? Like the next big opportunity. And lo and behold, the next big opportunity that came up was you get to go to the northern Philippines and build a new location for our company. And so I think in hindsight, nobody else would have wanted that opportunity.
Seemed like a downgrade,
Because
probably, right? Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's tough, like, to get people to uproot their whole lives and move. But given I was in my mid-20s, I was young, aggressive, eager, right? Wasn't washing dishes, right? So I was like, yeah, I'm into it, right? So I basically ended up in my mid-20s in being dropped off in Naiya. And this is, of course, before Naiya was what it is today. It was much, much worse. It was Naiya 1, Terminal 1, right? The really older looking one. And it was before NLEX. So I had to travel, kind of up that dusty road to Pampanga. I got dropped off and then basically just start from scratch, being a young Canadian guy in the middle of Pampanga, trying to figure out how to launch a location. And so, we were building sites at that time. I was working with a colleague of mine named David. He was kind of a good mentor for me at that time. And we just worked together, built it up. And that's kind of how the Philippines started for me. And, there's a lot of the story that begins after that. But, 10 years later, I was still there, and I finally left after 10 years. So that's how I ended up in the Philippines, kind of at a young age, working in that industry.
Yeah. So that 10 years, right? And then so from 10 years after you joined the Philippines, that's when you joined TaskUs.
Well,
When
I
you
was
went to the Philippines?
I was about 5 years with a previous company. The company kept getting bought. So it started out as called RMH Teleservices. It ended up being called APAC, EGS, and it's ultimately now today it's called Alorica. So all
Right.
those companies kind of got bought up into what is Alorica. But when I left in 2014, it was called EGS. And later bought up by Alorica. But I joined TaskUs, kind of end of 2014, early 2015.
Yeah, I know a little bit about the story of you joining TaskUs. I mean, obviously your career in EGS is kind of a typical career. I mean, save for the fact that you had to move from Canada to the Philippines. It's almost like a normal career trajectory for someone to move up, right? But the Tasca story is a little bit different, right? From I've heard the story a lot of times, where you joined Tasca, you also took a risk here, right? You took a big risk. It was a company that really wasn't established. It's a makeshift, almost a makeshift BPO on top of a welding a welding shop in Cavite, right?
Yeah, vulcanizing shop. Yeah,
Vulcanizing shop, right? Yeah. So
yeah,
so how did that happen?
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting story because the BPO industry, in its traditional sense, was you know telecommunications, financial services, very like outsourcing. Kind of had a really ugly name.
Connotation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was cost reduction. It was take as much as you can from people, right? Treat them badly, right? And not for the intention of treating them badly, but treating them badly through some bad decisions is kind of what it was. And I bumped my head against that. Being a younger guy in a larger and older organization, I bumped my head against that philosophy a lot in the years when I was in EGS, where I felt like we could make a lot of money and treat people well, right? And I proved it a lot because I would have my group, and when I left EGS, I had 5,000 people working for me, and we were the most profitable. Um, but we also spent a lot on our employees, raised benefits, like that type of stuff. So you give what you get was kind of my philosophy up until then. Got to a point where I realized that my impact on the organization wouldn't be big enough to really change the entire organization. And I just realized that I was putting so much effort into trying to change some of those philosophies that I just didn't feel like the organization wanted to make the changes at those times. And around this time, my daughter was being born, my second child, and I was kind of waiting because I was just frustrated. And you know those low points of your career you kind of get to where you don't know where to turn, you don't know what to do, right? You're kind of just searching for something. And so I was waiting for my daughter to be born so that I could go back to Canada because I was going to leave. And I met a couple of young guys through a friend of a friend, kind of a weird coincidence, right right around the time my daughter was being born, right around the time I was frustrated. I was praying about it. I didn't know what to do, right, to take care of my family. I get a call right the day before my daughter's born. I literally walk across from St. Luke's into the Starbucks across from St. Luke's and do my first kind of interview for this potential role. And they said exactly the things that I was praying about that I really wanted in my life, right? So it was like almost like just destiny, fate, answer to prayer, whatever you want to call it. And I met the founders. I was really impressed. I really felt like they were leading with their hearts, that they cared about people, that they were serious about what they meant, etc. And then came the later stage of the interview process where I saw their facilities, which were very close to sweatshops. And yeah, you're right above a vulcanizing shop. They had it was a kind of a low level play school down the hall, right? The computers and the security were all, really bad. They had a raid from the NBI due to some software licensing issues. And so the press around it was really bad. The optics around it were really bad. But because it was felt like such an answer to prayer, mixed with I really believed in the heart of the founders and what they stood for. I talked to my wife and she was like, let's go for it. Right. So um, went for it. And then, that's kind of where the journey started. And so when we started, it was, in the interview process, I always remember this number that it was $8 million in revenue as a company, about 400 to 500 people when I first really started talking to them. And then when I left in late last year as the COO, we had almost 20,000 people across the world. We had launched Taiwan, India, Philippines, US, Mexico, Greece. Yeah, it was a really good success story, helping a lot of people along the way and kind of building the organization up to where it's at. And, they just filed for an IPO.
They did. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, they just did. So that's really exciting for that company, and I'm proud of
Amazing.
my part in all of that. But now I'm on to the next thing, and so kind of looking forward to what's next for me. So
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, before we get to the next thing, when you were talking with these guys, so this is Bryce and Jasper, right? Like the
yeah,
founders. So they had $8 million in revenue, but there's really no proof of concept to what they were talking about, right? Like the vision, like it's pretty hard to imagine looking at the ARC, the shop that they had there, right, in Cavite and Connect. the vision to what was actually happening at that point in time.
Yeah.
What made you like what gave you the confidence to actually make the leap? I mean, there was a lot of alignment to what you wanted to see, as far as culture was concerned. At the same time, what their vision was, but it was still a big risk. So was that the only thing that gave you confidence? All of that alignment that you saw from talking with them?
Um, yeah, I think for leaders, just for people in general, it seems to me like the human brain has got like a fight going on at all times. And, you could call it right and left, but I've heard it described as like limbic brain versus logical brain, right?
Lizard brain. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the tough part with confidence is a lot of what needs to make up your confidence comes from your emotional side, comes from your limbic brain, comes from your like non-structured thought, right? Um, and so when you're trying to rationalize your decisions, it's really, really hard,
Yeah.
right? Because like you go like, I feel like this is the right thing to do, but am I crazy? Am I insane? What's going to happen? What's going to hurt me? Right? What happens to my family? Right? So you got this logic pushing against kind of your gut instincts and your feelings, right? And I would say that for me, in that time, desperation and motivation are powerful forces where you know you succeed or you die. Sometimes is the way it feels, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so in that time, especially if you're poor, it's a superpower, right? If you're fearful, it can be a superpower if you point your mind in the right direction, which is don't fear what could happen and try and stop that, but seek out what you actually want to achieve and go after it with all your force. And if something tries to stop you from achieving that, right, you find a way to kind of wiggle around it. So in those days, the majority of my time was spent telling people what we could do, where we could go,
Just building
what
up
we
the vision. Yeah.
yeah, what we could accomplish, where we like what's possible, right? And we came up with at that time, I still have it. It was a dream board. Like it was just a like we got the leadership team together and we just said everything's on the table. What do we want for the company? Right? List down your craziest, insanest comments. Like, and there was things like, we want, like an office that has a slide in it, and we want free food for everybody, and we want beanbag chair, and they just kind of went on and on and on and on, right?
Those things
Um,
happened.
yeah, and we measured it later, years later, and it was like, something like 60 to 70% of the list actually got achieved, right? But to kind of go back to that phase where I was, in that tough spot, and it's really hard to imagine the optimism kind of around the office with the cockroaches and the rats and the vulcanizing shop and the noise, right? You've really got to get out of that logical part of your head, get into the emotional part of your head, and start dreaming forward, right? So just really, really important that we do that.
Yeah, because logic kind of draws from past experience, right? Like things that have already happened, data that you have available. So if um you're creating a vision, or you have a vision of something that you want to happen that's never been done before, it's kind of gotta have to be based on emotion and your belief that it could happen. And then so that's one thing, convincing yourself, but at the same time, like convincing everyone else around you of something that's never been done,
Yeah.
or doesn't seem to be possible, is something else. So how do you do that? How do you manage your emotions in that sense? Like, doesn't um doubt ever creep in? I'm pretty sure it does, right? At some points.
Yeah, I mean, doubt creeps in, fear creeps in. You have those moments, but how does it serve you, right? And so I went through a lot of coaching sessions, kind of with my time off between the TaskUs gig, and the gig I'm just starting. And I did some coaching sessions to a lot of people around the world, and just talking to them about what's bothering them, etc. And that fear and that doubt is very popular, I think, with a lot of people in the world with COVID, right? Everywhere, right? Everybody's fearing, what if, family stuff, what if work stuff, what if I get laid off, what if I can't make money, right? There's just a lot of that fear that's out there, right? And when you do that, it usually it's funny that people only take that fear so far, right? So like there was one lady I was speaking to, and she said the same thing. She was like, "What if I get fired?" Right? And then she got an emotion, which was that fear, but then she didn't go any further, right? And so all I had to do was tell her is like, "What if you get fired? What then?"
Yeah.
Right? And she goes, "Oh, well, probably I would take some time off." And I go, "That's not that bad, right?" I was like, "So you'd spend some time with your family, right?" And she'd be like, "Yeah, I would. I'd spend some time with my family. Would you work on a special project?" She's like, "Yeah, right." And so with her, the minute she started to really take that fear and like go further with it and really think through the implications of what getting fired would mean, that's when she suddenly got comfortable, right? Now, there's the flip side. I spoke to somebody else who had a similar fear, right, about getting fired. And when I pressed, right, the problem was financial, right? So they had debt, they had a lot of costs, they had a lot of burdens that were on their shoulders, right, which were financial pressures where if they lost their job, it's going to get bad, right?
Right.
And so in that person's case, I was like, very important that you save your money so you can get out of that fear space and get into a better place, right? And I only knew this because when I was younger and I was washing dishes and doing the pizza thing and all that kind of stuff, and in the call center, the time in my career when I grew the most was the moment I had 6 months worth of pay in my bank account. And you know why? Because that's the time where I didn't fear getting fired anymore and I could be my authentic self and I could do what I needed to do. Right. And so then I didn't fear my bosses anymore. Therefore, I was more willing to take risks. I didn't fear my bosses anymore. Therefore, I was willing to challenge the status quo. I was willing to think more outside of the box. Right. And I could just imagine, well, if I get fired, I'll find another opportunity. Right. And I would argue that that's a superpower in today's age, because there's so much fear and doubt out there, and that being able to not only think beyond the highly negative and rationalize it, but also being able to put yourself in a position financially or in any other way so that you don't have to walk around with that fear. I mean, that gives you the ability to be a true charismatic, risk-taking, leader, in today's environment.
Yeah, just having just like thinking about the worst case scenario, what's the worst that could happen, and being prepared for it, right? Being accepting it for what it is, and just being prepared for if it does happen, what am I gonna do? And like always just having that self-awareness where you know everything that could happen, like you know what your burdens are, what your responsibilities are, and if the worst does happen, you just have to be prepared for it,
Yeah.
right? um
You also see it in smaller companies versus bigger companies. Bigger companies don't take many chances because a lot of the time they're largely bureaucratic, right? And if you speak up, you could get politically in trouble or what have you. So less people speak up, therefore less innovation takes place. Smaller companies, people feel more connected. They've got more relationships with people in the organization, so they take more chances. They speak up more often, right? So you kind of see that same dynamic on the innovation side too, where smaller companies are more willing to take risks and innovate, just because people feel safer because they have the relationships to kind of lean back on, while bigger organizations have a tendency to just hold the status quo.
yeah. It kind of becomes like a revolving door of people where bigger companies, like there's this feeling, I don't know if it makes sense, but there's this feeling like you're a number, you're a role, you're whatever your role is, and if you rock the boat, then there's a million other people just like you that could just fill your spot. So that creates another layer of emotional insecurity, another layer of fear, and so it just kind of trickles down. And for someone in a leadership role, having that fear carrying it around, it's very hard to kind of compartmentalize that and not let it affect the people that you're directly working with, right? Like your direct reports. It's kind of a big thing too. Like in TaskUs, I know we talked about how much of the culture, um the culture was very important to you specifically, right? Like when I got there, we used to do core value nominations like at every begin, and it was so weird for me, like coming from the company that I was, it was weird. Like you have to put yourself out there, right? Like you have to be like just having that mindset, right? Like it's just so weird to be culture focused. Like where did you learn that? Like where did you learn how to value culture, how to value people, and you mentioned a little bit about that, where that was one of your principles even back when you were with your previous companies. Because it's very like in today's age, right? Like in today's situation, I think having emotional security, emotional like psychological security in the workplace is extremely important. And yeah, so where can you share with us like where you got that? Like 'cause it's really something that leaders need to learn from.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me why people don't see it as the best course of action, you know? And like I
That's a very,
tried,
I just want to say that's a very Robert thing to say.
yeah, I know, but like to explain kind of why I think that way is because early in my career I tried more abrasive management techniques, right? Like I was more aggressive, younger people, especially
Hmm.
more direct, even more so than I was as I've gotten older. It just didn't work. It had all kinds of unintended consequences to me, and to my team and to my performance, when I was abrasive like that, right? And so, if you're trying to get somebody's performance to improve, right, um, yelling at them or making them feel bad in any way is just completely counterintuitive. It just does not work, right? You might get a short term fix, right? Very small on a simplistic task. You will not get a good long term relationship built and a good employee for the long haul. You just won't, right? And so for me, where leaders try and argue against, having a psychological stress free environment, having a team where we pride togetherness and relationships, and building an environment we all want to be part of, I just don't understand the counter argument, right? Because I've never seen a high performance company achieve with those type of techniques, right? Really what this conversation comes down to for me, John, is long-term thinking versus short-term thinking, right?
Yep.
Short-term thinking, if I threaten John and I say, John, get your KPI up by 20% by next week or I'll fire you, right? Or I'll write you up or whatever the case may be. You may get your performance up, you may, but any other job offer that comes along, you're taking it, right? The minute I'm looking the other way, you're going to change your behavior, right? You're going to go behind the scenes and say Robert's an asshole, right? And that's going to infect the environment that we're in, right? So I don't even need to be a nice guy, fluffy culture person to just say that the argument for a strong culture and a psychological stress-free environment is a logical one, in which means results are better, right? And so, yeah, culture activities are really, really important, but they're very, very important that they're specific. You show what they are, but also what they are not, right? So in our environment, I was constantly pushing that culture nominations had to be specific and say exactly what the behavior was that was a reflection of the culture. And we also had to make sure that we did it to others outside of our sphere. So I wasn't just patting my own people on the back, every time we did one of those, right? And so, I think if you recognize that a psychological stress-free environment, is extremely important, you start to make different decisions. And I think if you recognize that, people will perform when given the appropriate tools to do so and supported, it really changes your approach. And you didn't mention this, but I'll mention this because I think a lot of people need to listen to this. Performance management plans that focus on writing people up are just not effective, right? And I mean, you can almost look at any data that you want to support that. I've looked at it multiple different ways over. Coaching and development works if it's supportive, understanding, and you're building a bridge. But performance management plans, which are rampant in the BPO industry, just don't work. And you worked for me for a long time. I was constantly against, especially frontline focused performance management plans, but also kind of against any because I found that most people want to be successful. You've just got to try and meet them halfway in order to make them successful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Absolutely. I think one of the key root causes that that created the idea around performance management plans against like agents or frontliners and towards getting them out is the fact that they hired wrong, right? So what do you do if you hired someone who's not a fit? And I think that's where the solution of having a performance management plan that churns people out came about, right? So in that sense, how do you fix that where you've hired wrong?
Well, that's a really easy thing to say, though, right?
Yeah.
Really, really easy thing to say, oh, we hired the wrong person, right? And leadership who don't want to do the work, um, who want to place blame somewhere else, right? Will often do that. They'll say, oh, we hired the wrong person, right? Um, I mean, to be labeled a wrong person is real tough, right? It's like when you have a child, they say, never say your child is a bad kid. Just tell them what they specifically did that was bad, right? And be very careful about that difference because if a kid starts to believe they're a bad kid, then you're in for some real trouble because they'll become one, right?
Right.
I think it applies to wrong hire the same way. I would ask specifically why they're a wrong hire, right? And then if you gave me a Python programming job tomorrow, and you came up to me and you said, Robert, your Python programming skills are not good enough, right? And we walked through why, I'd probably fire myself, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's what stuns me is like most people, if they recognize facts for what they are, they'll do what is the right thing for the organization and for the greater good. But if you walked up to me and you said, Robert, you were the wrong hire, right? Well, then that would be a whole different story because I don't think I'm a wrong person, right? I think I'm valuable, I think I'm worthwhile, right? And I think anybody thinks that, right? So if my leader came up to me and said, hey, Robert, these are the wrong hires, I would just simply ask why.
Yeah.
Why are they the wrong hires? What behaviors are they displaying that leads you to believe that? What have you tried so far? Right? I would keep pressing until we got to the root of the issue. And then we could have a more intelligent conversation about if that's the case or not, or if there's another course of action that could help that person achieve what we need them to achieve.
Yeah. Like some examples of some of the justifications I've seen for labeling a certain group of people the wrong hire is like they would generate some data and show that, like for example, for an account that's been performing or that's been in place for a long time, like they would show data where agents who were hired with like 3 years experience, technical support background, perform better than those with less experience and only have customer service background. And that's kind of the justification that comes into play
Yeah.
when creating these performance management plans. And then in that sense, like it's not even like individual looking, right? Like it's not focused on the individual. It's more of like a mass profiling type of thing where you hired all of these people and turn around and say, now, oh, I shouldn't have hired all these people.
Well, they average of average, right? Which is common with that type of a thinking, right? So you do is you take a data sheet, right? They say they categorize everybody into 0 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, whatever the case. And then they look at the aggregated scores on whatever KPI that they think matters the most to them. And then that they go is, oh, wow, look at this particular group is doing the best. Right. And so, you know, there's a lot of other reasons why that could take place. You could have better hires in just one group because, you know, the employment market was better 2 years ago, right, versus what it is today, right? You could have team leaders or leadership in that one group who are just better than the other leaders, right? Tenure can be a component. I mean, data science is a science and a profession for a very good reason, where you need certain sets of data in order to draw real correlations. And so, like, in my opinion, what that person would be doing is looking at the data, averaging a lot of stuff out, drawing conclusions that they already had supposed before they approached it, right? And then basically saying, here's a rectification, which is not my responsibility, which allows me to get off the responsibility of solving the problem. This is what you need to do, right? And good leaders just don't do that. You know, good leaders go, they look at the data, they individualize the data, they look at all the different points and they go, wow, that's interesting. And then they go ask more questions to the people who are on the ground, who are doing the work. They listen to what's actually happening, and they try and basically link the data to what's actually happening on the ground with those people, and then draw conclusions from that, right?
Yeah.
And anybody coming forward with we need to get rid of people, it's just always the easy answer, right? And a very, very few times in my career have I been a place where I felt like that's the answer. So,
Yeah. I can't imagine that you had an easy life before joining TaskUs. I mean, you're a weird guy. Like the way you think is different, right? Like you think different. You think it's always. I would imagine like you would be in meetings with leadership from all these different companies, and you would be always going the opposite direction,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
what made you such a good fit for TaskUs. Actually, I feel.
yeah. I struggled. I got in trouble a lot. So I got written up a few times myself, right? So yeah, I definitely struggled, and I would struggle because I have a strong ethical bone too. So if I felt like there was a lie or there was low integrity decisions being made, I would get in a lot of trouble. So I remember one time I got written up for this, which was at the time a COO came to town with an SVP in tow, and the president of the country was in the meeting too. And they were basically promising in front of me that the recruitment was going to be fixed for this account that we had. It was a key account, and they said all that, and I said, no, it's not. It's not going to be fixed. Don't lie. It's not going to be fixed, right? And I
Did
was
you at least sugarcoat, like politicize what you just said it straight up?
said it straight up,
Damn,
yeah.
Robert.
And I was VP at the time, so I was the lowest rank, one of the lowest ranking people in the room. And yeah, I mean, I got in trouble for it, but you know, like I said earlier about sometimes you just you got to put it on the line and stand up for what you believe in, and find your path, right? So I don't know if I did that the best. Like, if I went back in time, I would probably say the same thing, but and make my point just as strong. But I think I could probably do it in a slightly better way. But I still look back and go, I did the right thing. I just wasn't as talented at getting my point across as I might be today, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um so what would be your advice for people who like feel that they're in the same position that you were in, where they have strong principles, they believe in the things that they believe in, and they're just in a situation where it's just so bad, or it's just not, like there's no alignment in what they believe in versus what the organization that they're in believes in, right? I think I would say, like, I don't know if you agree, but I think you would, but I would say were very lucky, very blessed to have met Bryce and Jasper when you met them, right?
Yeah.
But for people who haven't met the Bryce and Jaspers in their lives, like, what do you think? What would you advise for these guys, for people like that?
Well, I think, I mean, I'm lucky. I absolutely agree with that. But um, the role that I took got passed over 30 times, over 40 times, something like that. That's what Bryce and Jasper told me before I took the role, right? So it was an unattractive position to people in my position, right?
Mm,
And so if you think about it, um, I mean, one of the best decisions I made in my life, right? But I was 35th or 40th down the list of people that they wanted to try and hire, right? And that was because my previous company, I had 5,000 people. We were doing 25 million in revenue, right? I mean, reputable company, right? Nice offices. It had all the above, right? The new company I went to, total revenue, right? Not just my accounts, but total revenue, 8 million, right? Only about 400 people, sweatshops, right? No benefits, right? etc. So I made that leap, right? Now, was that a luck leap? Well, in the end, it turned out to be a luck leap, right?
yeah.
But at the time, it felt like one of the scariest leaps I ever had to make in my career, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, my word to people in general is that we get told that we need to work at a reputable company. We get told that we need to work for the brand, that we need to do these things because this is what other people do. And what actually matters the most is that you're very passionate about what you do. You really love what you do, right? And that you can see a future for yourself somewhere down the line, right? And if you can get into anything where you kind of have that passion and that and the joy and you really love what you do, um, everybody says this, very few people do it. Um, it's amazing what you can accomplish, right? So you can be an artist and be an amazing one, but you got to put the time, passion, work, and effort into it to become an amazing one, right? And I think it's the same with really anything. Is if you're gonna love what you do, then go for it. And it's just as important that I was unhappy and searching and upset with my old role, even though I had good money, good position, good company, all the rest, because of the reasons that I've already outlined, as it was that I found that gig and I used my heart to kind of drive my decision at that time. Right. And I find myself back in a place again in this last few months where I left TaskUs because I didn't feel like it was right for me anymore. I felt like other people would do a better job. I felt like it was time, right? I still love the company, still love Bryce and Jasper, but I jumped out of something where I had all the reason in the world to stay, right? But I didn't feel like it was right for me anymore. And now I'm jumping into something which is similar to what I talked about with TaskUs, where it's small. There's really no reason, right? I have to take a huge pay hit, right? There's all these logical reasons why I should not do what I'm doing. But because I'm going to enjoy it, I'm going to like it, I'm going to want to go to work every day. I'm going to have that passion, right? That's why I'm doing it, right? And I think the more people could make those kind of decisions, I just think the better off those people are going to be. And it might not be evident what success can come your way, but I think it's really, really the case. And think about yourself, John. Right? Like here you are doing a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like it, you enjoy it, right? Seems like you're working on it, right? You've got a side job, right? That you're doing, right? But I mean, I don't know why, right? Why are you doing it, and where's the passion, right? So these are questions that I think all of us need to answer. But I think it's really important that we do. And the only difference I think between what other people are doing and what I'm doing is I try and put myself in a position where I can make that emotional decision by making sure I put money away, saving my money, not spending it on stuff that would put me in a fear position or a debt position, right?
Yeah.
But on top of it, just getting that kind of solid concrete base so that I can go back to work and just be excited and passionate about what I'm doing, and then eventually it just snowballs,
Yeah.
right?
It all ties together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. It aligns to everything we've talked about so far. So can you tell us a little bit more about like this new gig that you have? I mean, you're a name brand now, right? So everyone's interested in
Yeah.
what's next for Robert Hayes.
Yeah, it's good timing. I just announced it this morning to the organization that I'm joining, and I'm going to put it online tomorrow. But I'm joining Athena is the name of the company as the CEO. Um,
Wow.
and so joining them, they do it's basically master delegation. So what they do, they have an app in the App Store where you can delegate tasks to an executive assistant. And they also provide executive assistants in the Philippines. So it's kind of a tied together bundled service where if you're a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley or a business person and you want help with your meal planning, with your calendarization, with your emails, with templates, with setting up board meetings, right? Like whatever you need, you can basically come to us. We'll match you with somebody in the Philippines who can be that person for you to kind of bring all your personal and professional goals together. There's multiple different plans, so you can either sign up for part-time EAs, full-time EAs, or multiple EAs, like a full group. And then you can use the app to delegate tasks. They actually go into the app, they get transcribed, put into Asana or email or Slack, depending on what you prefer to use. And then the EA gets automatically notified of those tasks so they can handle those tasks for you. So I'm really excited about it. The founder, Jonathan is his name, feel very similar. Just a good-hearted person who wants to treat the EAs really well, build a really, really strong culture. I'm really impressed with the technology innovation that they've been able to do so far, given how new and how small the company is. And I'm starting it to try and get up and build that culture and provide the world kind of empowerment for some of these people who are changing the world, from an environmental standpoint, from a technology standpoint, help provide them services to kind of balance their personal and professional lives and achieve goals. So super excited. If you want to check it out, www.athenago.com. We've got a little bit of a wait list right now. We've got 700 people on the wait list
Oh,
waiting.
really?
Yeah, to get set up. So I'm working on the back end to try and solve that problem over the last couple weeks. But super excited to see where it can go over time.
Is the bottleneck on the hiring? Like you don't have enough AEs in the Philippines?
Yeah. So we have really, really high standards. This is a very, very kind of advanced job that gets done. So our EAs are doing things like, they're running a board meeting for venture capitalists, right?
Wow.
They're taking meeting minutes at some of these high level meetings. They're booking calendars. They're sending emails off for some of these, like, the VP of Google, right? Like they're really involved in kind of the day to day with a lot of these really advanced organizations around the world. And so we have a very, very stringent hiring process. And so getting kind of the best of the best is a key part of the process. And so, I think it's solvable. Being in the Philippines for 10 years, I've been more and more impressed with people over there. I think they're more than capable. A lot of the times I think they're better than the rest of us. so so I'm really excited about that. But using my expertise from being over there for a long time, just my love of technology and my love of just innovation, I think we can build something pretty special. So
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see where you take this, Robert, and we'll definitely be there to support you in any way. It sounds like your AEs are actually going to be like. It sounds like they might be at least supervisor or manager level, right? Just to qualify
yeah, it's true. The pay is suits that too.
at par. Yeah.
They are above supervisory level. So
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for your time. I'm amazed that we're even here, but I appreciate it. I'm so grateful that you spent this hour or so with me. And is there any other way that we can support you or your new company, like follow you on Facebook or whatever on social media?
yeah, I have a tendency to post on LinkedIn. So I've posted over the last few months. I've posted a few articles just talking about some of my journey with coaching around the world. Posted one a little while ago. So if you want to check that out, that'd be great. But yeah, supporting the new company is probably the best thing to do as we kind of build it, and build another company out there that's going to take care of its people, and just build a culture that people are proud of, right? So just that www.athenago.com I think would be great. But also, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, that would be fantastic as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to include that on the description and on the comments when I post this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Thank you so much, Robert. Appreciate it again. Hope we can stay connected even more as you go through this new journey or new chapter of your journey in your life. Appreciate it. I know it's going to inspire a lot of people. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Robert. Bye-bye.